All right, welcome to episode 1. Like I said, today we're going to be covering Filip Leu's new book, his 40-year spanning career. This book has his life, his tattoos, and his artwork. For the most part, we're just going to be focusing on some key tattoos that I think were super important to me, that I remember from seeing in magazines and other books from when I was younger. And how they're going to apply and how we can kind of break them down and look at what's working in these tattoos and why he's known as such an amazing epic artist. So let's get started. First of all, this is a gigantic book. It's probably over, let's see, almost 600 pages. You probably can't see that, but 600 page count. Like I said, broken into 4 sections is the 4 decades he's been working. But we're not going to go, this isn't an in-depth book review or anything. This is just literally some cool tattoos that I think are really going to make for interesting subject matter. So let's get into it. First thing I wanted to cover was this amazing photo of Filip at age 12 tattooing. It's just super cool. I mean, that's how you can work, for 40 years and you're only like maybe 10 years older than me. So, that really has nothing to do with that. I just think it's a cool image. There's a lot of cool back matter type stuff here of his story in each section and his life and what was going on. Some cool Polaroids that are probably a little too small to read on the camera of what is really going on here and how cool they are. I really note that a lot of these skulls have such great life to them. And I think that they're not really overly rendered, right? So we've got a couple things in these skulls that are really working for us here. We've got this movement here. You can see kind of he added some flow and some background elements here, along with the hair here and here, that's adding movement to the arm. Along with even the jaw. The jaw is slightly protruded and curved on this bottom section to elongate itself and move with the arm itself. And I think that is really helps it move and not seem weighted on the arm and just stuck there. Also, just the shading in the skull itself is very minimal. There's very little. There's a little around the teeth and some just in some key areas, but a lot of it is pretty open. Same thing with the hair. The hair is very open as well. And that just really helps to this levity that it has. Let's go back to that really quick. I think that's an important takeaway because over-rendering is something I see a lot of people do and that I've done myself. And it's just, as long as you have you have great shapes and you have great general composition, that should work in and of itself. I heard once before, and I think it might have been Filip, he always said, a design should be strong in each section of how you do the tattoo. So it should look basically finished once you do the outline, and it should be strong and hold on itself just in that sense. And then it should also be, strong once you just add some shading. And then if you have color, then that adds another element and should look finished there as well. Another great skull. Some cool little bikery skull stuff. Here we're getting into some of his early kind of psychedelic art and some Japanese stuff. This book isn't put in any chronological order, so a lot of these tattoos are kind of jumbled together. This is probably definitely done in the 80s, whereas this was probably done, in almost 1990 or something. This is super cool. And even just an interesting thing, even though this tattoo is fairly heavy in its style, probably done in the 80s, it it has an interesting layout, right? Like, and these big open sections of the throat here with the kind of almost fiery brightness add a lot of levity to this. You know, if this was done black behind this or a darker color, which you would think like, oh, it's the back of a throat, they're coming out of this demon's throat, mouth, then this wouldn't work as well. It also brings color re-representation back up to the oranges and yellows that are up in here and up in the hair. So you've kind of have this balance of the color coming up and down. Some more early Japanese. Some great skulls in black and gray. We're going to kind of skip through a lot of this stuff. This is really cool. I love a lot of this early illustration. You can definitely see he's pulling from a lot of Greg Irons and early kind of European and outsider comics out of America, like punk rock fanzines and stuff like that. You know, it's got a lot of those elements, but it's its own thing as well. The perspective on this and how this is kind of set behind but then pulling over. I think you're going to see so much of this in his work where, you know, there's these different layers and like this is pulling your eye this way, but then kind of leading you back into the picture and curving you around. And you're going to see so much of this represented later on in his work. All right, we're going to jump ahead just to these tattoos. So this is a section, as you can see, from 91 till 2000. So we've gotten in kind of the second decade of his work. In my notes here, I've got, you know, these sharp whiskers of the dragon. So there's a big dragon head for the entire back. The sharp whiskers, and then the S curves, which you can see here on the hips and like thigh, groin area, really help with the movement. You know, you look at this and it kind of frames him out, but still gives him movement to his body. So say he got smaller or bigger, that would still work with this guy's body. The eyes and the eyebrows here perfectly put on the shoulder blades, so they're just going to really move and be dynamic once that's actually in the skin living. You know, say you saw this person on the beach, you know, and you saw that tattoo moving, it would have so much life and dynamics to it. But the thing I want to take away with these whiskers is he's kind of giving the client some time to breathe, essentially. Like this tattoo isn't going to take forever because he's taking big chunks out of here, but yet it still looks interesting, right? So you've got these interesting shapes that are super dynamic. They're pointed, and then they're expertly placed in painful areas. I mean, the butt up top into the kind of crack underneath the butt cheeks here, and the thigh, and then the armpits, and even kind of the center right here. Like, I know for me, this was a pretty painful area because I'm a tattooer, and I carry a lot of my tension up through here. And so I look at that, I'm like, oh, that's so amazingly designed because he just saved that person so much pain. There's really this is all done in black and gray. So that person just got left with not as much pain as they would have if he would A, rendered all that in color, or B, you know, made a bunch of different designs there. I think it's just a really smart choice. But yet I see a lot of people skip these areas, but they don't make it built into the design. So it's like, if you're going to skip these areas, these armpits, I see a lot of people skip them. And I think it's just out of sheer laziness, or they know their client isn't going to really want to go there and spend the time it takes to get all that saturated black or gray or color in those areas. And this is a cool, interesting built-in design element of how to skip those spots, but yet still make it interesting. And I think that's a really important takeaway from this tattoo in general, and a lot of stuff you're going to see in his work, that we can find interesting design elements in how we can design the tattoo. So A, it takes less time, and B, it also looks still interesting and saves the wearer, the client, less pain. Here's some more great negative space. Once again, kind of really saving a lot of time there underneath the butt, so you don't have to go through a lot of that for yourself and for the client. Same thing in here. This was probably fairly quickly done. And once again, we've got a lot of negative space here. I think this tattoo is on Mickey himself, the person who put out the book, who puts together all the European conventions. He's a great supporter of tattoos. And, he's got a great bodysuit from Philip. So, all right, we're going to skip ahead a little bit to this tattoo. Now, I remember seeing this one and just being blown away. The movement on so many levels to me, and the repetition of that movement in different areas, just really, really interesting. So if we can just go to just the main picture here, I think some really cool takeaways here are the movement here on the butt, thigh, hip, and how that's mirrored again on this smoke going through the shoulder, armpit, and to the back. So you've got this kind of mirrored section. And then if you look at it again, you've kind of got this opposite with the body and the color. And that's kind of mirrored underneath here, kind of here. So already you're forming kind of patterns of where the eye is moving, because this is leading you up into that. And then the color leads you back into this, which kind of pulls you around and back into itself, and then around and down. It's just really smart design and smart tattooing, because once again, not much in here, not a ton in here, and so it's quickly tattooed, but yet it looks really interesting. And I think that's my biggest takeaway from here. And also, I would say the heaviness of the coloring in the dragon, like there really isn't any open space in any of the coloring. It's all fully, flatly rendered. There's no open skin in it. And that kind of leads to how much levity he put in the rest of the black and gray in the background. If you look at these waves here, right there, there's nothing in them. They're just open. It's open, skin. And that really helps break up a lot of this heavy color. All right, we're gonna skip ahead again. Cool Giger piece. Nice little Kieran. Some more great skulls. There's a reason why he put out a whole book. And if you don't have that, or you haven't seen it, Filip Leu's skull book is just phenomenal. Some cool kind of bio-organic stuff. Some older black and gray dragons. And these don't work quite as well. They're not bad tattoos by any means, but they're lacking a little something, like the flame, smoky stuff up in here gets a little kind of jumbled. And it doesn't serve this cool claw here as much. Same thing with this dragon face right here, which I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but it's like there's a little bit too much stuff going on in the background here that you really don't get to see the impact of that dragon face. And once again, it's not that it's a bad tattoo, it's just there's a little too much going on. And this is some earlier stuff, probably right around 90, 91. And so he's still figuring stuff out. He's still figuring out what he likes to do. This page I had noted in my notes here from last night, I think is really cool. Not necessarily that it's like, if you really start looking at it, it's kind of some cheesy 80s rocker vibes, right? Like rock and roll and spider webs, and I want some roses and a big skull with a playing cards coming out of its mouth, and a piece, 8-ball on flames. But I think this thing works so well for a lot of reasons. And one, Philip didn't take any, he didn't pull any punches. He didn't go, oh, this isn't my favorite concept, so I'm just going to kind of phone it home and just get it done, right? Like, he took the time to really think about this and make it the coolest tattoo he could. And I think that that's a really important takeaway with his work in general, because you see it throughout his work. No matter what the subject matter is, he's always taking the time to make sure he can make it the absolute coolest thing that he can make. Like, even this lettering, it's just really interesting and cool. I like the stacked nature of it. I like, that it goes kind of, and it looks like rock and roll, right? Like, it's all just, it has movement to it. The rendering of the piece 8-ball is really cool. The negative space of the roses up top really gives some breadth to this shoulder area, let alone all the negative space in the skull. I mean, it's cool. And how that negative space here in the face makes you just get pulled into those eyes, right? Because they're so deep and dark, and it's the first thing you see. And I think the biggest thing, though, like I said, the takeaway is he didn't pull any punches. He went full bore. I'm going to make this the coolest tattoo I can make. And it's this guy's whole arms and legs and back. And rightfully so. You should put every ounce into it, because they trusted you to do that cool of a tattoo on them. Some more cool skulls. A lot of negative space. This one doesn't work as well, but I think this is earlier on, and he's still trying to figure out his rhythm with the negative space and how to achieve a quick back piece, but yet make it be striking. This one, like I said, isn't working quite as well, but it's earlier work, and so, we're going to give him a pass. Some more earlier Japanese stuff. Definitely has that early 90s, late 80s vibe, I mean, I remember seeing, like, stuff from Eddie Deutsch and a lot of American guys a little later, like around maybe 92 to 94, looking like this, and I just thought it was so cool. It was just the coolest. Kind of skip through a lot of this. These are pretty cool. Cool little like Gandhi portraitish psychedelic thing here. Wizard back piece with some dragons. All right, this is the one I really want to talk about. This dragon sleeve here. What I think is really cool is, once again, kind of what I was going back to with that last sleeve, is there's just straight reference taken. He is not trying to come up with the coolest dragon and show off, like, look what I can do, look what I can draw, I'm so much better than everybody else. He's not letting that ego come in. He just found a really great reference, realized that it would work great for a sleeve, and just put it on there, and then tattooed it pretty much exactly like the reference. I've seen this, I've used this reference before myself, and it's just such a great thing. And if you think about this is probably mid 90s. None of these pictures have dates on them, so I don't know exactly. But, and you're seeing people, coming out of, a lot of Korean kids are doing this. A lot of Taiwanese kids are doing this stuff. And I think it's really cool, This is a straight Kano style dragon from a scroll. And it's just so perfect, and it fits that arm beautifully, and it looks really interesting. And for the 90s, I mean, this is just heads and tails above anybody else that was doing anything. And I love that he still had this I Ching thing right in the center. I'm sure that was a client request. And I myself would probably go, oh, I'd rather not do that because it's going to break up the whole thing. But it still looks cool, and he found a cool way. I like that he left some open space around it. I want to note also these this kind of rock and roll guitar like 3/4 sleeves. They're kind of funky and fun. They're both kind of in dragon forms. Like the body of the guitar comes up here and then swoops around like you would have the head of a dragon on both of them. And I think that's really cool. Once again, I know Filip Leu's into music, so he's probably like, oh, I want to, that's fun. I'll do guitars. But yet he still kind of like put the influence and what he knew is working for dragon and how they laid out on a body or a snake. And he applied that to these guitars. And I think that's really interesting. And you would obviously see people who were doing like new school tattoos in the 90s apply some of this stuff, but it wasn't quite I feel like there was a lot of cheesiness to it. Whereas these don't look as cheesy to me. I think they just look cool, and they look like they look otherworldly. They look psychedelic rather than just like, I don't know, big head bobbly eye kind of bad graffiti. Not even good graffiti, but bad. All right, let's jump ahead. Oh, these are pretty cool, actually. These should be noted as well. This shishi here, I remember from a Horihide book, Gifu Horihide. I've used it before too. So once again, I love that he's just finding a good reference, knows there's something to it. He knows like, oh, that has a magic to it. There's something about it. And there's no ego to the amount of like, oh, I can draw better, shishi than that. So I'm going to do that and show off what I can do. Like he just saw a really great reference, knew it had some magic to it, and had the foresight to go, I'm going to just do that. And then he does it for this guy's whole leg. I mean, you can see it goes from his hip all the way down to almost his shin, So that's pretty cool. That's where he kind of showed off. He took a great reference and then he used his sizing and layout as where he would show off. So I think that's really cool. And I think that's kind of a note in a lot of Japanese work is it's not always how you're drawing something. You can find a really good reference, but how you're laying it out on the body could be heads and tails above everybody else. Some more cool takeaways from this. I think there's just a good rhythm of color on these legs. Once again, he did the backs of these knees and the fronts of these knees, which is kind of these open waves. And that gives it, just some movement and openness because the flowers are pretty heavy and dense, but also saves the client a lot of pain because those spots suck. So if you can save clients pain, why not, Some other cool stuff. Great openness to this back piece. I love this one here. Let's move this over a little bit. And this goes back into, he's really studying traditional Japanese tattoos and why they're working. And this is going to be something we talk about a lot on the channel here. Is why does this work? And a lot of it comes down to whether or not he knows it. And I would guess that Filip does know it, but he's got a lot of geometric things going on here. So you've got kind of these 2 feet here, which are creating these cross sections here, right? Which is mirrored once again, kind of by the way that this is going. So all this stuff kind of goes this way, right? But yet again, you have the head and the top of this and this neck and head and claw over here going this way, and that swooping claw going that way, which mirrors this section as well. So you've got then crossbars essentially in both of these sections. And it just really, and then S shape throughout the whole thing. So he's just looking at a lot of this stuff, being like, where do I need my heaviest spaces, my heaviest, interest areas, but then leave some levity in the middle, and then add some movement. It's really expertly designed. And if you look at a lot of old Japanese tattoos, Japanese dragons that are just standalone dragons like that, they're doing the same thing. He adds a couple cool little twists in it, some cool foreshortening in the neck and stuff here. But really, the layout is exactly what traditional Japanese would be doing. In my notes here, I have like, this is kind of what I remember as like the start of a lot of his big oversized stuff. As far as a lot of backs go. This one once again has some problems because I think there's it's a little too dense for my taste. Like, there's just a lot of things going on. I like more background in Philip's work where he just has a lot of openness to his work. But there's still some really cool stuff going on in here. I mean, the angle of the dragon head really lends to having any movement in this piece. Since it is so dense, you really need the shape of your giant subject matter to really do all the heavy lifting of your movement. Otherwise, this image would be so stagnant and kind of uninteresting. Some cool dragons, older stuff. Great legs, once again, great skulls. Cool little kind of upside down flip-flop Oni face. It's pretty cool. Planning for later on this one, being like, oh, I know I'm going to do a back on him, but he just wants to get his legs right now. How can I plan that, set myself up for success? And we're doing full bodies. I mean, that's a thing you really got to think about. Like, all right, where does this person want to start? And how am I going to set myself up for success for extending it later on? More cool skulls, a lot of negative space. Like, oh, here, I don't want to tattoo this guy's whole spine. I'm just going to do a giant negative space flame there. And it looks cool. Here's some great examples of the diversity of work again. Cool psychedelic little portrait again here. Great skull there, the black and gray nature of that with the depth in the eyes, nose, and mouth, and then most of it left open. Really great. And then the color on the outsides. Super cool. This tiger's really cool. It has a great classic layout. Like, this is like a layout, the exact layout I think of. Like, a lot of Horiyasu has this pretty much this exact layout, and it's perfect. And once again, maybe the person didn't want a full back, but he still set them up for success. They're good if they want to get the rest of the background later on. But if they don't, it still just looks cool as a standalone. Some cool stuff. Kind of funky, fun, like almost just black work back piece of this bull head, or I'm sorry, bison head. It's pretty interesting. I love, this is Philip's wife, Tatine. And I love that this is just literally a Horitoshi dragon. Just straight, once again, ripped. He just saw it, knew it worked. He did a couple little flares. That tail's obviously a little different than what Horitoshi would do. And even the peony on the shoulder, which looks like it may have come beforehand. But the dragon itself is literally just a Horitoshi dragon. And he just took what he knew worked great, and he just tattooed it and did it expertly to the best of his abilities. And this is going to be art. We're going to skip through a lot of this just because I want to focus on tattoos. But, a couple things to note. Like, once again, he's doing so many studies. He's just doing so much art and pumping it out because he knows this is going to make him better. And I think a great takeaway is just make a bunch of art. Doesn't have to be great. You don't have to show it to anybody. I feel like with Instagram we wanna show everything to the world, but sometimes we forget the sketchbook thing of like, some things only need to be for you. They only need to be for your sketchbook, and you don't have to show anybody. But it's just a study for yourself. I remember these dragon sheets. I think they were in 2000, and this was like right when I started tattooing. And I remember these came out, and I thought it was so cool. The colors were really interesting. You know, they were kind of subdued, but yet there was really bright areas in them. And then the side dragons I just thought were so wild and far beyond anything I could draw at the time. We had both these sheets of flash in the shop, the biker shop I started, and you know, I was always trying to get somebody to get one of these. I don't think I ever did one, you know, but actually I take that back. I think I did this one on a client back in the day, and I'm sure I just completely screwed it up because I had no idea what I was doing with any of that. And for 2000, it's a pretty awesome dragon. It's fun, and there's quirky little things like the legs are super skinny. They're almost bird-like, which is kind of weird, and it's a chance to take. But I like that he took the chance, and it's kind of fun. Some more cool dragons. Just interesting. Like, I'm just gonna play with color and shapes. You know, I don't know. Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. And I think that's just kind of fun. Just more drawings. Like, fuck it, I'm sitting on the beach. I'm gonna draw this weird candle scroll chick beach scene. Because why not? Studying more body stuff. Like, even if he didn't use these, and I think once again that's a takeaway. Like, he probably never even intended to tattoo anything like this, but he's just playing. He's using sketchbooks and paper, and it's just his time off to play and imagine stuff. And I think that's really great. And a great takeaway is don't be afraid to just have some fun. Like, who cares if it sucks in the end? You took that time to just be imaginative, and that's really what doing art. And I think why we all got into it in the first place. All right, so we're going to skip through pretty much most of this. Like I said, there's a bunch of really cool, a lot of his art again, which if you pick up this book, as you should, you can look through on your own. Skip ahead. Great skull. Little overly rendered, right, for him. At this is all gray in here. And I feel like, so this is 2001 to 2010, and I feel like at this time, he's hanging out a lot with Paul Booth. And Paul had a lot of like just deep grays in his stuff, and was rendering. This even looks like it might be a Paul Booth up here. I recognize those shapes that Paul always did. But I know he's doing a lot of conventions with Paul, and so I would be willing to bet that he's putting these extra grays in here because stuff he's seeing Paul's doing. And, you know, that's a cool, interesting. Now, the takeaway is conventions were kind of our way of communicating with each other. What are you trying? What are you doing? And it's kind of a shame that a lot of that is gone by the wayside. But I think that Instagram, YouTube, as we're doing right now, is replacing where those conversations are being had. And I hope that this channel can actually facilitate a lot of that. Like why is this cool? Why do I think it's cool? I love these negative space flames because once again, all this stuff hurts so bad. You just saved your client so much pain right there, but yet it looks really cool. Great dragon. Some kind of funky stuff in here. Like, I don't know if I love this weird little wind donut thing here, but you know, overall, I mean, it's a great tattoo. And like I said, like, he's just taking chances, you know. Sometimes it's not this is a bad tattoo. It's just like, I'm gonna try that, see what it looks like. Another cool standalone dragon. Really cool one with I really love that there's no wind bars or anything in this one. It's just where the background is just black. It's just solid black. And I think it really makes all this color pop out and the openness, because this mask is so open. It really makes it work. You know, because all the color surrounding this gives some, almost does the heavy lifting of what the heavy background would do. Just really cool. Cool choices. Cool Fujin Raijin. Once again, just straight taken from reference. I can't remember who did these ones exactly, but you know, and leave in the comments if you remember who did these. Put in the comments who did it, did the original reference. Another cool one. Once again, he's just taking classic layouts and doing his twist on it. Great legs. I mean, that whole leg is a honey mask, which is just wild, you know. And I think it really works. I think it's pretty cool. You know, from any angle that you're looking at it, you can tell what it is. You know, at no point are you like, at no point of looking at that tattoo are you going, I don't know what that is. And that's when you know that it really works. Also, the nose right on the knee is just a cool element, you know. It's gonna, when it flexes, that person flexes, it's gonna look really awesome. Great black and gray, like dragon back piece. Once again, a lot of openness. All these belly scales are mostly open. There's a little bit of shading up in here, but for the most part, once it gets down to here, it's just open. Same thing with this claw and a lot of the head. Those horns are basically just open. And that's just smart choices. Another great bodysuit, mostly just waves. I love this piece. This one is so complex, but yet works amazing. I think in my notes here, I've got a couple different things. Hold on, let me see where I put these. So there's kind of some different layers of this thing, right? A lot of the background is mostly, even though a lot of this stuff is moving at an angle, it's still really on very horizontal lines. Like these kind of all stop at the same place, and the same place as this rock, and they create this horizontal line. Same thing with down here, it creates a horizontal ending point visually. And same thing here. But then you've got all these chrysanthemums, and they're all kind of moving this way. They're all moving angular this way. And then same thing with your butterflies over here. They're kind of all moving in this direction. And the clouds too, in the very far back, are all kind of moving in this direction. So you've kind of got these different layers, and it's one of those things where there's so many elements going on. It could have been just overly done. But the fact of that he's using these different horizontal, vertical, and angular elements and just playing off that rhythm of each section, it just really makes it work. Yeah, and the depth too. You know, these clouds are really gray in the background, really deep, but yet, you know, this is a little bit lighter. Once again, the butterfly is just open. It's just line work. These are basically just line work, and it works. All right, gonna skip through a bunch of this. It's good stuff, but just not anything I really want to cover. This is a fun one. I always love this bodysuit because I always use it mentally as a reference of where blue water can work. You know, I know for me coming up in the, you know, I started in 2000 tattooing, and once I got later into my career, like say around 2005 or something like that, so much of this blue water was kind of cliche of sorts, and I didn't want to do it at all. But I think this is a great example of you can do blue water and it looks cool and it still looks traditional. You just got to approach it the right way. And that's great. You know, you just got to maybe lighten up a little bit than what you would do traditionally with if you were using gray. But overall, you know, I mean, for blue water, that's the best blue water bodysuit I've ever seen. This is a cool one because you have his full sketch here. And what I really love, and you probably can't see it because it's really small, is he did these contour lines. Philip did these contour lines on the nose, the head, shading out this whole claw here of where he knew he wanted to create the shapes. You know, he's looking at that when he's doing the shading. You know, I'd be willing to bet that this was all outlined and most of that dragon was shaded in the first round, which is pretty phenomenal for that person. getting that tattoo and Philip doing it. This is not front pieces, man. All these stretchy bits up in here. You know, this is all painful for the wearer. So, I mean, it's not easy to tattoo. It takes a long time. Really cool one. Once again, he's playing around with dynamics and black and gray. This one's a little bit more detailed, doesn't have as much open space. Once again, I think he's, you know, hanging out with Paul Booth a lot here. And so he's getting more into those deep grays, you know. And if you haven't, if you don't know Paul Booth's work, you should go, and you love black and gray, you should really go check his stuff out. It's pretty amazing. I don't know if I have any books. I probably have some old magazines that we'll look through eventually that have some of his tattoos. I loved Paul's work in the 90s and the early 2000s. It was what I thought, you know, next to Philip, it was some of my favorite tattoos. Some cool stuff. Great bodysuit here. I love this one. Cool yellow peonies, which really pop on this guy's skin too. Super cool. This piece I really wanted to talk about, because once again, it goes back into my thing of, you know, I think so many people think of Philip as this great innovator, he just can draw anything, and it's all coming out of this genius mind. And this back piece is pretty much straight taken. It might be a Horicho layout, but the dragon itself is, once again, Horitoshi. This might all be referenced from a Horitoshi, but then he used a Horicho layout, you know, and so much of it is really traditional, except for some of the water, you know. And I think that that's really an important takeaway, once again, is like, we're referencing stuff, you know, and if you're not referencing tattoos, or if you're not referencing great classic art, no matter what style you're doing, I mean, you could be doing, I don't know, really anything. And if you're not referencing great art, you're kind of doing yourself as an artist, a tattoo artist, a disservice. You know, take ego out of it, take away that you think you can draw the coolest dragon or you've got the coolest layout. Go look at some great stuff, and more than likely, your end tattoo will come out a lot better. And I love this tattoo. When I first saw it, I knew it was referenced from like Horicho or Horitoshi, and I think I didn't really get it at the time when I was younger, and I was like, oh, that's not really a Philip tattoo. But now I look at this and I'm like, oh, wow, this is amazing. This is really, really cool. Because he saw some stuff that works in it. You know, the dragon's looking up in here, and you've got these, you know, once again, angular elements, you know, bringing the movement up and down, but then a lot of horizontal stuff within the background. It's just really cool. Oh, here's that guy's back with the yellow peonies. Super cool. Love the movement around the back and the hip here. That's so cool. Really awesome. Some cool stuff again. Great legs, cool detail. Seen a lot of people. Shout out to a bunch of people in New York I've seen rip this. That scale pattern, which I mean is just ripped from the, you know, that style of dragon. But still. Some cool stuff here, you know, there's a lot of really deep, dark stuff, and then a lot of open stuff up top. Some of it works, some of it doesn't. It gets a little confusing through this area, if I'm quite honest. But a lot of it still really works. He gives a lot of levity in, once again, open finger waves down at the bottom, and then really open up in the back, and that helps break things up quite a bit. Cool dragon. All this stuff is Kyosai, just straight rip, traced 100%, and just put on this person's back, you know. And I think this is a cool element, because it's like, oh yeah, Philip drew every aspect of this dragon, but yeah, then all this stuff down here, a good third of the tattoo, he just traced and put on there, but then tattooed expertly, you know. And I think that's, a great testament to Philip's genius of knowing when to utilize reference and, when he can just do his own thing. He's definitely feeling a dragon that day, and maybe not as much his stuff. Great Hanya mask and waves. Once again, great movement. Everything's going down at angles. And just, which really these dramatic angles here are angular elements. Like, that's like probably a 45-degree angle that most of this tattoo is on. Really helps bring home this guy's very tall and long. This person is very tall and long, and so you need a dramatic angle on this person's body to show that, because anything less than that wouldn't be working. So the dramatic angles, really help with this person's body, and you can apply that in your own work in the way you'll use less or more of that depending on the shape of the person's body. Great dragons and stuff. Always awesome. This one's cool. This one almost has like elements of his early illustration. That this psychedelic Jimmy thigh piece, which you're not really going to be able to see the nuances of it on here, but it's so cool. And these three women, which I would pretty much bet are rips from references. I'd bet he didn't draw those. I bet they're referenced pretty heavily, but they're cool. Really cool back piece. Yeah, super cool. Lots of color, right? Especially for Philip. This whole back is pretty much color. Even the background has color, Getting into some of Philip's more psychedelic stuff, abstract shapes and color and just playing with line and depth and darkness. Pretty fun. Great bodysuit. This one, we could spend an entire video just on this bodysuit. I think when I first saw this one, I think my biggest takeaway was I actually really liked these kind of almost traditional tattoos he has up here on his chest. And I think Philip did those as well. And I think they're really cool. Cool dragon. I don't love as much this giant claw in relation to the head, just because it seems a little outweighed. But it's him just playing around with stuff. Once again, he's just like, oh, that would be fun. I'm going to try that. It's probably one of the first bigger claws that he tried, I bet. It's cool. Great openness here. So here, look at how open just left all that. Same thing here, left a really cool cut along the armpit breast line here. It's really great. Because once again, set this person up for success if they wanted to, say, go full on front piece. Because right now our front's pretty open. But if she wanted to, she could extend a lot of that background. Super cool. Love this tiger. Another sleeve that's just taken from an old scroll painting. Just straight 100%. Just pretty much line for line. Put it on there, knew it would work. And it does. He didn't draw that. He just probably woke up tired that day. He's like, oh, I got to do a dragon sleeve. I don't have it in me. I'm just going to take a great reference. Or the client saw this reference, showed it to Philip, and was like, I really like this. And Philip's like, cool, me too. I'm just going to straight use that reference. Also, what a bold choice to leave pretty much the entire inner arm here open. I don't know if you can really quite see that, but almost all of the inner arm is completely open. Pretty cool. Cool, fun skull and snake. Big yellow skull. Huge Hanya. Probably the biggest one he probably did. Interesting. I really like the red line along a lot of it. That's kind of interesting and cool. I always love this person's suit. I think it's so cool. Once again, utilizing a lot of those dramatic angles. A lot of dramatic angles here because this person's very long and slender. So get away with a lot of that. And I think you can utilize those dramatic angles too, like if you want the tattoo to look slimming per se. You know, say you've got someone who's a little bit more heavier set, you could use a lot of these dramatic angles and the tattoo will look a little bit more slimming in a lot of ways. But I love these rocks down here. And it's all, once again, just boom, 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 like 45-degree angles. And then a lot of this stuff is more horizontal. So that kind of goes back to what we were talking about with that chrysanthemum and waves and butterfly back pieces. You know, horizontals for the most part. Horizontal, horizontal, and then just dramatic angles cutting through them. It's really cool. Obviously an older piece. Love the density of the flowers in this one. I think they're really strong and really just give a lot of oomph to that piece. This one, once again, this is him really going through and like, how can I finish a bodysuit as quick as possible? Because most of these waves and so much of that background is really open. I thought it was going to have more. If you look underneath the butt, mostly open. And I mean, this takes forever to tattoo. So this is just smart tattooing. And it looks good. It brings a lot of openness to the piece. Same thing, backs of the knees, mostly open. Groin areas, mostly open. You know, chest, armpit. I mean, look at that. Here I'm going to not tattoo any of that armpit, chest around the nipples because it sucks. It takes a lot of time. But yet I'm going to work that into the design so it looks like I'm intending to do it that way. But yet you're saving time, you're saving the client pain, and it just looks really interesting and cool. It's really smart tattooing. Cool dragon. Some cool black and gray stuff. You know, once again, this just goes back to I'm going to take on whatever I can. And that's the tattooer, I feel like, in Filip. Like, you know, he's not saying no to a project because it's not fitting within his style. And I feel like within our tattoo world right now at this moment, so many people are like, oh, it doesn't, and myself included in that. I fully fall prey to it. Oh, I don't really, that's not what I do, quote unquote, what I do. You know, everybody thinks that's such an important thing right now. But, you know, like, he nailed this tattoo. It's awesome. But yet, if you didn't know, you probably would never know that was Filip Leu. You'd just be like, oh, that's a really great tattoo if you just saw it. Some more older stuff. Playing around with some of those ideas of the openness around the butt and painful areas. Always love this one. I don't know. There's just something about it. And once again, I think this one came out of working alongside Paul Booth. And I especially look at the armpits and how dark and deep recessed those skulls are. That just screams Paul Booth in the 2000s to me. And this piece works the best of the little bit more overly rendered skulls. You know, this one's got a lot of shading in it, but yet it still looks really light, and it has a lot of life to it. And I think a lot of that is because of the shapes. This looks great along the groin, under the stomach area here. You know, this frames this person's rib cage perfectly, and then into the chest area and armpits. Just really expertly tattooed and designed, really. The design is what makes that super cool. I remember seeing this, it was in Tattoo Artist magazine, the issue that Filip did. And this one blew my mind because I was just like, oh, I always just associate Filip with Japanese dragons. But here he is doing like straight like Dore style European dragon bodysuit. And I love the cool, just dark, atmospheric background on this one. Here's one where he didn't, I'm not going to save you a bunch of time around these painful areas. He just packed it all in. Deep, dark grays, amidst all that black. Most of the time-saving elements are done in the dragons. There's a lot of openness to them. This is a cool element of the wing here and its movement along there. I mean, so much of this stuff can be really cliche, but it's just done really expertly and it looks cool. Super cool. Looks like one-shot skull. This Shige's bodysuit, which I remember thinking when I first saw it, and that's my biggest takeaway, is it's a little busy. It's a little much. There's a lot of things going on there. But Shige's a tattooer, so, he's probably just getting each of these sections whenever he can, from Philip. He's like, oh, I want to get this one, get that one. Whenever you can, because traveling so much and everything. But also speaks to Shige's work now, right? Because, what do we associate with Shige now? Not as much his older work, but now, just layers upon layers of detail and patterns and colors. So, probably this had an effect on his work for years to come. Not my favorite Philip bodysuit, but it's still a great tattoo. But this one's cool, right? Love so much about this one. And once again, the person's very long, very tall, and he's using really, even more dramatic angles on this one. And once again, complemented by these stark horizontal lines to contrast the deep angular elements that he's putting in there. Just, and that's why that works, is like when you're laying out stuff for tattoos, it's like more than drawing something cool. If you can lay out shapes and rhythm beforehand, like trace out the form, take a picture of this person's body, trace their form out, be like, all right, I'm going to break it up into these 3 sections, right? Because it kind of, here's a section, here's a section, here's a section. And then those are your horizontal planes. And then you start adding your, angular, more vertical stuff that is playing against those. Super fun. Once again, time-saving stuff. Big and open. Really open for as detailed as this side is going to be. It's like, all right, I'm going to save some time over here. And it looks cool. Cool Fudo. This one's a super time saver again here too, right? Skipping a lot of the butt, shoulders. Most of the background is barely there. I don't know if this one works quite as well. It feels a little empty to me. It feels like different sections instead of a complete thing. I'd like to see where this person's body is now, if they finished it. Because I'd like to see this whole side come together, because I feel like that might tie the room in, so to speak. This one, I love this one. This one I know for a fact is just a straight Horicho reference. And if you don't have that Horicho book, I'm going to be going through it later on in the series. But this is line for line, taken out of that book. Background included, the dragon included. He maybe improved on the face a little bit, just squared it up a little bit. But for the most part, it's straight the Horicho reference. And that's awesome. I think it's cool because he's just, I know I want to do this back. I want it to have that look. Let's just take it. Let's take it from one of the masters. Cool dragon. Big cover up. And that looks cool in the final product. But you look at that, and I think a lot of people would look at that and go, oh, I can't what am I going to do with that? You know, and even in this stage, it looks kind of scary. You're like, oh man, I don't know if you can see that, but the face is still showing through there. That horse is still showing through. That face is still showing through. But by the time you get the black background in there and stuff and some of the spottiness, it's gone. This is one that's really cool. I feel like the deeper, darker grays in the mask really start getting honed a little better. You found a good rhythm with it in this one. Love the minimal color in this one. Just a little bit of red to bring some flow. This one's kind of interesting. Like clearly like an older back that he did, right? You can see the kind of ending of probably where it ended right here. And then newer legs. Probably like 20 years apart. You probably did that back like 20 years ago and then did those legs. And you can see you're like, oh yeah, it definitely looks different, but yet it all works. And I think that's an important takeaway is like, you don't always have to just like completely reverse engineer your style of what you would have done, 20 years ago, 10 years, 5 years ago. I'm going to slap it and it all looks good. As long as you got the same kind of rhythm of openness in the black and gray, it all kind of blends together really well. Tying the room together. Kind of playing with those ideas of the open chrysanthemums again. Once again, really dramatic angles. And then horizontal planes. This is probably one of my favorite pieces by Filip in general. I'd heard later. All right, so if you can't quite see it here, maybe you can if you're watching on a TV. But all the dragons are completely open. They're just negative space. And there's one, it's like 3, I think, maybe 4. And I had heard there was a rumor that the guy, asked Filip to fill him in later on, and Filip was like, no, that's how they're supposed to be. And he went to somebody else and got them filled in, which I don't really know how they would do, especially with all this kind of smoky shapes here in the body. But such an interesting chance to take, right? Like, I believe so strongly in just the shapes of these and my shapes of my background that bodysuit is going to work. And it does. I think probably one of my top 5 bodysuits Filip's ever done. Super cool. A little more detailed. You can see he had fun drawing that one. Probably when he was just drawing, he was like, I'm just going to have fun drawing this one. Some cool psychedelic stuff, right? These legs. Once again, just taking chances. Just going, I want to see where my, artistic expression is taking me, and, clearly was painting this stuff already and people saw it and probably gravitated towards it. We're like, yeah, I'd get something like that tattooed. And just went with it. Didn't go, oh, I'm Filip Leu, the dragon master, Japanese, European artist. Like, went, I'm just going to follow where my heart kind of takes me. And I think that's super cool. And it's one of the things I really love about Filip's work is he's not burdened down by, like, who he thinks the world thinks he is. He's just going where his artistic inspiration takes him. And that's awesome. Did some cool work on her arms. Super fun. Oh, this is collaboration with Paul Booth. Interesting. I wouldn't have imagined this was done in collaboration with Paul Booth, but it's a really funky, interesting thing. We're going to skip ahead. There's a bunch of that psychedelic artwork. So obviously this is where people are starting to see is more psychedelic art. And they're like, oh, I'd get stuff like that tattooed. And I think he ends up taking more chances like that. And you can see even in his paintings, the use of shape and then and movement is really it's prevalent. So we're gonna skip through a lot of this. Sorry, go buy the book and you can look at it all. Oh, I loved these dragons. They were so cool. I think we had them at Slave to the Needle when I worked there. And I just stare at them all the time. Bunch of old, cool tattoo, friends and family stuff. Okay. Get into this one. This is like current day now, so this is like 2010 to 20 or whatever. This one, once again, it's a Horicho reference. I mean, he's definitely redrawn the dragon a lot more in this one than he did with the previous two. But I recognize this, and it's straight Horicho, just altered, Does his version of water and changes up the shapes in the dragon, but it's still a Horicho layout. And you saw that in that layout, it had something special. I love the dynamic sweep on this one. Really comes around the shoulders and then back into the piece. That line of the head here lines up with the flame right here, which really brings you back over to here and through the rest of the tattoo. And that's smart stuff. Like, always remember with your drawings, like, have pieces lead into other pieces. The eye, they don't have to like physically move into them, but where's your eye taking you to the next part of the image? Doing studies, drew it on paper first, then drew it on the back, and then tattooed it. Once again, just from a great reference. I think that one's maybe a Horitoshi. I don't know. Leave in the comments, though, if you remember who this Kitsune, Dancing Kitsune is from. I can't remember exactly. Put in the comments, though. Cool skull. Looks like it's all in black and gray, but it's fresh. So it reads a little red. I don't know if you can see that down there. Love that. And once again, see, he's breaking it up into these horizontal sections. And you've got 1, 2, 3. And then kind of more angular elements that are bringing length are, a lot of these sections are going very vertical. So that's bringing a lot of movement up and down. And then the lightning is bringing your eye across and then into different areas. Very, very, very smart. Super cool. Just black work, which you wouldn't associate with Filip Leu. You're just like, oh yeah. But if you didn't know that Filip did that, you're like, oh, that's a nice back. But Filip, being Filip, yeah, I'm gonna take on that. I think this is a logo design he did for somebody, and then they clearly wanted it on their back. This one's with John Dix. Very interesting and cool. I love his playing around with people who have very different styles than what he has. And he's just having fun. Like, oh, where do our two styles kind of come into play? Love this Hanya. This is really cool. Just for the dynamics and the shading. Love the dark shadow of the nose on the top of the lip there. Super cool. And then once again, a really dramatic shadow underneath this cheekbone onto the right jaw. Very, very cool. The teeth down on the bottom are almost completely in shadow as well. The waves on most of the waves are open. Most of the forehead's open. Just a really quickly done tattoo, but very, very, very striking. I'd like to see that one settle. Some of this stuff is still pretty fresh. Here's this giant claw back piece. I don't know if you guys remember that one, but yeah, this claw is insane. I think it's his whole body, right? Except for up here. And then the wave on this side is a dragon claw as well. You see, like, here's the bottom of the arm of what it would be, and then the first claw, second claw, third claw. I didn't notice that the first time I saw this. I was kind of like, because at first I was like, oh, those waves are kind of weird. I was like, I don't know if I like the shapes of those. And it didn't dawn on me until much later. I was like, oh, it's a whole nother dragon claw up there. I get it. Pretty cool. And here's some of the process of drawing it on. More funky psychedelic stuff, taking chances, playing. Love the color in this dragon. I mean, you can really see, and you can probably even see in this video, like how deep, and this is healed. You know, that he's just saturating that stuff. It probably hurt like hell, but I mean, looks really cool. And playing with some of that, I forget where that pattern comes from in the dragon, but playing again with that in a more Japanese style dragon. And it's kind of psychedelic too. Like you'd see a lot of that pattern in like psychedelic poster art, you know? So yeah, plays with a lot of different elements in Filip's interest. Really interesting, just really simple and open. Turtle and some waves. Probably very quickly done. I bet this was done in 1 or 2 sessions. Love this bodysuit. And I know this person has since gotten their back done and down to 3/4 sleeves now. And Mike Roper and I'm forgetting the other person. Oh, Shad. Mike Roper and Shad did the back, and then I think Nick of Zurich, who's not in Zurich anymore, did the lower arms. But yeah, this is all the stuff that Filip did. I don't know if I hope they show. They don't. But there's a really cool koi going into this little. I don't know if you can see this kind of rainbow kind of thing here, and it's like the gate, the dragon gate, and then you can see this dragon still has some fish fins on it, back fin, and these little fins here. It's just fun. It's just cool and interesting. Taking fun, interesting challenges. I really like the shape of these dragons too. Like they really, they're open, and yet they just have a great flow. Like this here fits this person's rib cage really nice, and then this flows down into the hip flexor area, just really great. It mirrors the way this is flowing on the hip flexor on the opposite side. Really cool. It's a great skull too. You know, by this point, he's really honed down, like, all right, how much deep gray am I going to put for how much openness? And he's really just got it nailed by this time. You know, he learned the takeaway of what he liked about Paul Booth's work and how to apply it in his own, and really a happy medium. Here's that guy from earlier that we saw his legs. Clearly got the rest of his back finished. A little shoky. I think this was done mostly in one session. I saw a photograph of the person getting it tattooed at a convention. Just looked brutal. And can you imagine it? It looks like he just got his front and his back kind of all at the same time. Oof. Hokusai reference. Great waves. Well, yeah, I think that sums up. I think we kind of covered most of it. There's a lot of great tattoos in this book, and I really recommend going and picking it up if you can. You know, I think the pre-order is done, and now the main ordering of it is still going on. But yeah, Mickey Vallejo, Tattoo Life magazine really puts out a great book. You know what I mean? Filip Leu, one of the best tattooers in the world. All right, I think that's it for today. Thanks for tuning into the first video. Hopefully I didn't ramble on too much and you guys got some interesting stuff out of there. All right, we'll see you next week. Bye.